Good morning. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Today we are on lesson 18 of Paul's epistle to Ephesus, and we're covering Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 20. This one's called The Full Armor of God, Part 1. Most of us tend to think that our battles involve the people and issues of this world, completely oblivious to the real battles that continue to occur all around us. If we are in the flesh, we expect battles in the flesh. But as believers, we should remember that our spiritual lives are much more important than our physical lives. 2 Kings 6 gives us one of the best views of spiritual warfare. Elisha and his servant, a young man, faced a great army that was surrounding their city. Elisha saw the big picture, including both the physical and the spiritual realms. But all the young man could see was the physical. Elisha prayed for the Lord to open the young man's eyes. Though he could see the enemy's army around him, he did not see God's defense. 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 17 through 18 says this, "And Elisha prayed and said, 'Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see.' Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So when the Syrians came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, 'Strike this people, I pray, with blindness.' And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha." We can see the double-edged sword of being able to see what is actually going on in the spiritual realm. For many, being able to see that could be paralyzing. But we also should notice that Elisha was not paralyzed by fear, having seen the enemies of Israel, which also were the enemies of God. When Satan chose to rebel against God, he enlisted the help of 1/3 of the heavenly host. As angels are numbered as the stars in the sky or the sands in the sea, there are far more angels than we can imagine. What we need to keep in mind, though, is that God's angels outnumber the fallen angels supporting Satan by a 2-to-1 ratio. Yes, there is a spiritual battle going on all around us, but as believers, we're on the winning side. How do we know? God has told us through his promises and biblical end times prophecies, including the book of Revelation. Because God is outside of time and never has broken a promise, we know that he will not break his promise in regard to our eternal home. In addition, it is impossible to even grasp logically how a being created by the all-powerful God could defeat his all-powerful creator. In our next 2 lessons, we will study a very well-known passage in the Bible about the armor of God, available to all believers. Let's read our first passage. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 20 says this, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end, with all perseverance and supplication for all the saints. And for me, that utterance may be given to me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that in it I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. The battle continuously waged by Satan and his army of demons is all about deception. Satan is the father of lies and has practiced this skill for the whole time man has lived on this earth. He caused Adam and Eve to sin through deception. Certainly, Satan desires to keep people on his side by deceiving the masses of unbelievers in all things concerning God. But Satan also continues to wage this spiritual battle on believers, God's elect. Elect means chosen, by the way. The Jews are God's chosen people, and as Gentile followers of Jesus, we are chosen too. But don't lose sight of the fact that the Jews remain God's chosen people, and his focus will return to them. If God never will leave us nor forsake us, then how could it benefit Satan to wage war on believers? He wants to damage our testimonies, and in so doing, impede our ability to share the gospel with others. As believers, we need to trust God's power, and that is difficult for many people for many reasons. One of those reasons is that we underestimate the power of Satan. We know the verse that says, "Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world." But while God does dwell within us, we have to rely on him for his power, rather than thinking that the power comes from us. Job certainly endured a major attack from Satan, as did Jesus, all the martyred apostles, and likely every believer ever to walk this earth. But that does not mean enduring Satan's attacks will be easy. Most of us forget that Satan has been practicing his deceptive and destructive warfare for many, many years, and he's very good at it. He knows our weaknesses, and he also knows how to attack us. Satan's attack on Peter on the night Jesus was arrested demonstrates a different strategy. Peter bragged that he loved Jesus more than the rest, and we know that Peter showed more bravery than the other apostles. On that night, Satan attacked Peter in his strength, not in his weakness. Perhaps in his weakness, Peter would have relied on Jesus for the necessary strength, but in his own strength, Peter thought he could handle it on his own. In the same manner, we overestimate our own abilities. Satan and his demons can get us to deceive ourselves. Though we can fail in situations, God will get us to the finish line. Philippians 1:6 reminds us of this, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. We fail in situations because we either don't understand or don't apply the resources God has given us in his word. Isaiah chapter 40, verses 29 through 31 says this, "He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might, he increases strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." We need God's power and might to win the spiritual battles against Satan and his army of demons. In the Old Testament, the children of Israel often were encouraged to be strong and of good courage. But in this passage, we are instructed to be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. It's the Lord's power and might, not ours. Most of us have heard the adage that the Lord helps those who help themselves. That's not a biblical concept. God helps the helpless, not those who misunderstand the vast difference between God's power and our power. Most of us trust ourselves far too much. We either think we know more than we do, or even if we know plenty, when faced with a battle, we rely on self instead of on God. We also should understand some of the ways that Satan will bring these attacks on in the lives of believers. Satan gets us to fight each other. Verse 12 reminds us that our fight is not with flesh and blood, but instead our fight is against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. This verse describes the ranks of fallen angels. Though we aren't supposed to battle each other, we do that all the time. And it usually has to do with ego and our own desires. Certainly none of us are going to like everyone we meet, but we should do our best to be at peace with others, especially when that peace is up to us. In our battle against Satan, some tend to blame him in all situations, while others ignore him completely, misunderstanding when attacks come from him. The truth is somewhere in between. For most of us, many of our issues are self-induced. For example, for those who struggle with lust, is it Satan's fault for placing a beautiful girl in front of us? Or is it our fault for looking? It's likely that in the spiritual battle, we attribute far fewer attacks to Satan's army than the number that are occurring all around us. Don't forget, in Daniel 10, Daniel prayed for an angel and waited 21 days for that angel to arrive. Michael the archangel is the one who came and told Daniel he had been fighting with the prince of Persia, certainly a fallen angel, for that entire time. That is why we need to put on the whole armor of God, not just parts of it. Well, let's address this full armor verse by verse. Starting with verse 14, stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness. In 1 Peter 5, Peter encouraged us to stand in the faith, while Jude, the half-brother of Jesus, encouraged us to contend earnestly for the faith. Most of the trials we endure are similar to the same trials others have endured or are enduring. While God can protect us by placing a hedge of protection around us, God also has his purposes in our trials. God does not tempt us or put us into temptation. Satan certainly does. Remember, temptations only come from Satan and his demons. Stand. Don't sit, lie down, or ignore the enemy. Face the enemy. As we go through all of these, notice that there is no description of any part of the armor of God that is designed to protect us when we are running away. We are to stand our ground. Don't turn in fear and retreat. The armor of God will suffice if we trust in God. Next, we are to gird our waists with truth. Truth should envelop us, encircle us, wrap around us. In biblical times, they wore robes that flowed down to their ankles, but they also had a belt around their waists and could pull the robes up, tying them higher at the waist. This was particularly useful when moving, so the length of their robes did not get caught up on their legs and cause them to trip. In the same manner, truth will keep us from tripping. Jesus told us that he is the way, the truth, and the life. And it is the truth of Jesus that envelops us and keeps us from tripping. We also see that we're to put on the breastplate of righteousness. It should not surprise us that we can see most, if not all, aspects of the armor of God in the Old Testament as well. Here's a messianic prophecy from Isaiah. Isaiah 59:17 says this, "For he put on righteousness as a breastplate, and a helmet of salvation on his head. He put on the garments of vengeance for clothing, and was clad with zeal as a cloak." Paul's description of the armor of God is that of a Roman soldier, from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet. The Roman breastplate was important, protecting against swords and arrows, but the Roman army removed all different insignias, including rank, so that the enemy could not differentiate between the ranks of soldiers. Jesus died as a servant to all, fighting our battles. In addition, the Romans polished those breastplates like mirrors. In sunlight, they could be blinding, and the Romans chose to fight facing the sun. Don't forget what the breastplate protects, the heart. When Jesus died on the cross, he became sin for us. That means that all of our sins covered Jesus. He was adorned in our unrighteousness. And in exchange, when the Father looks at us as believers, he cannot see our sin, for it already has been paid for. Instead, God sees Jesus when he looks at us. We are clothed in the righteousness of Jesus. We have no other way for anyone to ever look at us and see righteousness. Romans reminds us that there are none righteous. God's entire plan was to give unrighteous man a way to have fellowship with the righteous God, and that plan was the cross. Once again, Paul wrote this epistle to Ephesus while in Rome, renting a private home. Though he was able to live in this home, he was chained to Roman guards who worked 4-hour rotating shifts, chained to one hand while keeping the other hand free to write. I would imagine that every soldier heard about Jesus for hours. But in this passage, we can see Paul using his surroundings to teach, just as Jesus often did. Paul had no trouble picturing a Roman soldier as 24 hours a day he could look at one chained to him. We will finish this passage, this chapter, and this epistle in our next lesson. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Have a blessed day.